All right, let's get into the last one of these argument analyses. We're almost done with these long list of podcasts for the new year. So today we're going to be going over another negative argument. This one is going to be de-escalation, which is, wow, very similar to what we were talking about before in escalation. It's the exact opposite. So if you haven't seen that one, I mean, it's not like it's going to be a prerequisite, but these will be nice to, kind of have those two pieces connected together. Probably should, it'd be good for you to go watch it after this one. That way you can see how the arguments connect. But regardless, just as a quick reminder, as always, that we are going to go through this video, starting by just generally explaining the argument. Then we're going to go by and discuss which frameworks can be used with this argument. And then we're going to go through and do rebuttals. And lastly, what I personally think about this argument. So, on that note, let's get right into it. So, generally, what this argument is going to be saying is just that we're going to see less wars if we have lethal autonomous weapons. The reasoning behind this is that we talked about how there could be more possible attacks in the escalation argument, but we're going to say that these attacks are less impactful when it's lethal autonomous weapons. This is going to be less from the fact that it's going to be done by lethal autonomous weapons. It's going to be more that it's done to lethal autonomous weapons. Obviously, if we have soldiers being killed, that's something that is much more impactful than a drone being shot down. This is obviously especially done like in the public eye, because like if soldiers are killed, then the public is immediately like, we got to retaliate, which that's somewhat justified. So like I get it. But like if a drone shot down, the public is more like, they probably won't even know. So it's like, oh, who really cares on that point? And it's like not going to be people kind of like calling for war and stuff, or the government trying to look strong and going back and trying to like assert their dominance against these countries that took one of their own, or whatever different like way you want to get to war. But obviously, very clearly, like people are going to be less concerned about lethal autonomous weapons being destroyed than they're about their own people getting killed. um, on the impact side of this, it's like no matter what specific type of warrant you choose, although they're all on the same idea where it's like what we just said, where machines matter less, um, we're going to be hitting this impact of less war, right? That was the whole point of the de-escalation argument, is that it's going to result in like less counterattacks and less just conflicts among the different countries, and therefore going to lead to less wars. Those less wars are obviously going to then mean that we have less just general casualties of war, which is something that is obviously a good sign and just good in general. But yeah, you're just going to lead back to those impacts where it's like less deaths, less war, those big types of ideas, which naturally leads us to our frameworks. The framework here, as always, is generally going to be very consequentialist, since we're talking about saving people's lives, maybe a value of life, value criterion to maximizing well-being, those types of big ideas, because as we talked about with the escalation argument, they're both essentially arguing the same thing. They're trying to say that their side prevents wars, and so you're going to be accessing the exact same impacts, and as a result, the exact same frameworks that we talked about in those two different arguments. So there's really no way to spin a like categorical imperative type argument here or deontology in any way, shape, or form. So I wouldn't really worry about that. And I don't think framing is going to be a super big issue here, because you can't even like really use like a justice argument or like an oppression argument. So it's like there's not a whole lot to do here except for just to go straight up with like pure consequentialism, which will get you like very far into this one. So that's fine. There's very strong impacts to weigh upon here, as we talked about, just like lives in general are a very good one, and obviously war leads to a lot of casualties. So not only are you having high magnitude in saving lives, but you have like high scope in the amount of people that it's actually affecting. So your impacts are going to be really strong on weighing here. So the fact that you're focusing on consequentialism, like that's fine anyway. It's not like it's hurting you. So there's really not too much like concern there, and you'll be set up with the framework that you got, even though you have to kind of go with this very singular one. Um, Moving on to just general rebuttals to this, as we've talked about several times, there's not a whole lot of that you can do with the impact. So we're not going to really focus on like weighing or minimizing here. However, you can definitely focus on like the warrants here. Obviously, we can just straight up go with the turn, which is the escalation argument that we are talking about on the affirmative. So you can just basically, like, even if you don't have that in your case, you can just put that through as a turn to this argument, where you're saying we're actually going to see more war because there's going to be more attacks with the lethal autonomous weapons. So this is more focusing. Remember how earlier we talked about how this is less focused on who is doing the attacking, but who's receiving the attacks. This is going to be the opposite. So we're focusing that still, like maybe yes, who's receiving the attacks is going to lead to less escalation, but the fact that we're going to see more frivolous attacks just in general is going to lead to more escalation overall. Also, you could talk about how like lethal autonomous weapons aren't going to be used inherently to just have this like drone on drone warfare or whatever. Like people have that vision that that's what war is going to get to, and I don't know, maybe it will at some point, but it's like no point in the immediate future are we going to be getting to this point where it's like there's no human interaction at all. It's just these drones going at each other to see who's superior. Like this isn't robot fighting, this is war, and we're still going to have a lot of human interaction. We're still going to have a lot of like on the ground fighting, and those types of things aren't going to go away anytime soon. So this argument, like even if we are seeing some de-escalation up to that point, it's not going to be as like much as like our opponent makes it out to be, because like at best you're minimizing, like there's going to be some drone attacks that are just like they're just attacking drones, in which case who cares, but these lethal autonomous weapons are still going to be used to attack like civilians, and they're still going to be used to attack like soldiers. So if that's the case, where like your own argument argues that those are the type of things that result in escalation. So if lethal autonomous weapons are going to do it too, then lethal autonomous weapons are also going to result in escalation, and you're not solving anything. Like you just completely destroyed your argument. Your warrant is gone. So it's like whatever. Like honestly, I just think those turns are by far the biggest thing you can do on the rebuttals here. I don't think there's too much more you have to focus on, because like if you can turn that argument, then you're pretty well set up for responding to it, especially because depending on what you run in your case, you can just like extend it. Like you don't even have to provide a new rebuttal, because you can just give what is already given in your case and that you already have to defend anyway. So it's like that's great. Anyway, I don't really think there's too much more we need to put on the rebuttal end of this. Moving on to just generally what I think of this argument, I've been kind of ragging on it, but I legitimately do like this argument a lot. I think that turn is a really good response to this. So if you run this argument, you are going to have to deal with that turn. But I think generally that the warrants are still pretty strong. And as we talked about, the impacts are pretty much untouchable, because you can't really weigh on that in most situations, which, as we've talked about, is a common theme, because most of these arguments are all about saving lives anyway. So I think you're definitely set up pretty well with this like setup, this case setup. I would recommend using this one personally. I think I'm looking at it myself. Honestly, I'm trying to remember my case outline. I can't remember if I have this or another one, but either way, it's definitely like a good starting place, and you should be pretty well set up if you do use this one. So definitely, I would recommend opting for this one. That's really all much I have to be saying on this argument. I've noticed these videos have become a lot shorter. Maybe it's just on my personal. Maybe we're getting to easier arguments, or maybe I'm just kind of blasting through it faster. But in this last minute or so, I really trying to think if there's too much more to say under any of the general topic stuff that we've talked about before. I will notice that I haven't really discussed much about like the weird definition debates, except for the topic analysis itself. And I think maybe that I'm starting to think that it's not going to be as big of a deal what you define under this topic, like as lethal autonomous weapons, and you're not going to get into stupid definition debates. I think you definitely will at some point still, just because I think whatever that opportunity is taken, some idiot's going to do it. But I don't think it's going to be as prevalent the more we've gone through these arguments. So that's definitely good, because I hate stupid definition debates. They're awful for debate. It was like what I talked about under the last video. The whole point of debate is to have this discourse between the affirmative and negative side, which are supposed to have strong and distinct sides, and it shouldn't be about some definition nonsense about like who actually wins the round. It should be based off who the actual debater it is. And if you have to use stupid tricks like choosing a different definition made to confuse your opponent, you're not a good debater. you're just good at like doing what you think is so like nice and clever, but is really just destroying the activity that we care about. That was like really strongly worded, but like that's legitimately how I feel, and that's why I hate definition debates. Ooh. Um, but anyway, I guess that was my nice little rant, and we got to our 10-minute mark. So I'm going to cut this one off here. That way we don't ramble for too long. But as always, I hope this video was educational, and I wish you guys good luck in all your rounds.